washing eggs. A little premature. Well, because we were on a Zoom call with Dr. Einstein today, and it was our monthly Savvy Organics teaching moment, and we had internet issues, and so the internet went out right smack in the middle of it. So, sorry about that. We'll make it a part 1. Yeah? Okay, so enjoy Dr. Einstein. He's great.
I invited Dr. Michael to join us today, and the subject matter we're going to mainly talk about is understanding the cause of all symptoms. So before we really dive into that, I'd like for Dr. Michael to let all of us know a little about himself.
Oh, okay. Let's see. I have a degree in biochemistry. Then I became a chiropractor, and I was the first chiropractor on a medical hospital staff in the state of Texas a very long time ago. Then I went on a search to find a technology that would facilitate revealing the root cause of any symptom or any process that people are going through, because the paradigm of what we have been given in this country is one that barely treats symptoms and never even searches out for the cause. So I came in touch with medical doctors in Germany who had done a 20,000 patient study in a hospital setting to document the temperature signature recognition patterns of all organs and all systems. And that was revolutionary. And I opened up the first thermography center in this country here in Dallas. And since then, we've done around 20,000 thermograms. And it's become the most sophisticated and revealing tool for true functional medicine, telling you how every single organ of your body is operating. Usually revealing changes 7 to 10 years before any other process. Then I studied natural medicine in Europe, then in Asia, then Africa, then Australia. Went to South America and studied in Central America. Holistically, we try to never label anything, because in our society, we have many associations with labels, no matter what the label is. It could be psoriasis, it could be high blood pressure, it could be diabetes, whatever it is, it conjures up usually many images or associations that aren't necessarily accurate, but have been imposed upon us due to the medical paradigm of making things simpler and then having simple remedies. So I've maybe treated or facilitated the guidance in maybe 5,000 people who have, because every single person has true biochemical individuality. And one of the major recent researchers from Harvard that discovered the connection between the brain and the gut, that also has been now labeled as a system called the enteric nervous system, where they initially said there's at least 1,000 neurons that go straight from the brain to the gut. And the brain-gut connection has been highly researched, well developed, but holistically, what does it tell us? It tells us that as we think and as we feel, is going to affect our digestion, our assimilation, our guts, and every other organ of our body. So the healthcare system has not allowed us to expand in this way of thinking, but yet it's very practical and makes a lot of sense and is really what serves us in the highest degree to always seek out what the cause is. And sometimes people will say, well, I got the flu. No, that's still a symptom. So when you're looking at a cause, you're usually looking below the iceberg. So the iceberg is sitting above the waterline and rising higher and higher. And then the crux of the iceberg, or often the larger portion of it, is sitting below the water. And it's the below the water where you want to really investigate where the changes are that aren't allowing either your immune system or metabolic communication to fulfill the beautiful self-healing aspects of the human body. So a basic tenet that true holistic healers look at is that the body is a self-healing, self-correcting, self-maintaining divine creation. And that alone is so amazingly game-changing and empowering to the awareness and path of the patient, and for the awareness and the path of the facilitator to realize that he does no healing, that he can eliminate things that are causing interference in the human body, but that the body itself is the true miracle.
And one of the interesting things I've heard you say, Dr. Michael, is something about healing in all dimensions. Can you talk a little bit about that, what that means?
Yeah, well, we mentioned briefly the enteric nervous system. So there's a classical great movie called What the Bleep Do We Know? And if you haven't seen it, you certainly want to put it on your to-do list. I've seen it about 10 times now. And it's a very interesting movie. When it first came out, it was what they would call a grade C movie. It wasn't in any of the major movie theaters. It opened up in one theater in Dallas. And then due to demand, it went to 2 theaters. Then it went to 4 theaters. And then it finally went pretty much mainstream, which took a while. But as people started to clamor for it and see its uniqueness, because it's a unique presentation of different medical community, holistic oriented participants, ranging from clergymen to pastors to medical staff at the University of San Francisco Medical School, University of Pittsburgh Medical School, Candace from the National Institute of Health, who uncovered pheromones, is in there. I mean, and there's the greatest physicists in the world. So it's very scientific, but yet very playfully done and very powerfully done to bring in all of the other dimensions that influence our health, being the upbringing that we have on the planet, the school teachers that have affected our thinking, the parents, the grandparents, and then the overall social media and social consciousness that's inundated our healthcare system. Just from the basic facts of, I guess one of the biggest lobbyists in our country have been the milk people. And they have led us to believe that in order to grow healthy bones and to grow stronger and be healthier, you need milk. Well, there's been so many scientific publications that have documented the erroneous premise, and that it's just a big industry that's used advertising to fool us. Well, in that fooling, the other dimensions come into play. Other dimensions means how we perceive life, how we think about life, and how things that are fundamental to our existence might not hold any truth whatsoever, but still influence us. So the other dimensions of psychology, emotions, spiritual connection to the planet and to the divine creator in our own bodies on a daily basis have such an amazing effect. I just saw a patient this morning and I was sharing with them, it's really interesting, the timing of stories, that many, many, many decades ago, there was a gentleman who got told that he had pancreatic cancer, and usually the lifeline of someone who has that diagnosed is around 90 days, typically. And they told him he had 30 to 60 days. So he decided to put himself into a hotel and he watched comedies for every day that he was there and that he was awake. He would always be watching something fun. And when he came out a month later, he went back to his medical doctor and they told him that his cancer was gone. So then they said, oh, they thought of, oh, Patch Adams, and Patch Adams is a modern day character who was a great healer in his own right by bringing joy and happiness and fun to the children that he was trying to facilitate their change in their chemistry in their body. So we are a pool of chemistries, and every moment that we're awake, if we're expressing fun, happiness, unconditional love, grace, harmony, peace, non-judgmental, compassion, then we're producing alkaline. And that's just a fact of life at this point. If we are stressed out, even though Dr. Hans Selye, who got nominated for a Nobel Peace Prize, documented that stress does not exist. So one starts to think differently. When you have someone in the medical community who is nominated for a Nobel Peace Prize because he discovered that stress doesn't exist, it gets your attention and you want to learn a little bit more about that. So we have a tremendous effect on our chemistry through many different dimensional exposures, moment to moment. And the miracles, the spontaneous remissions are all when somehow the alignment of yourself with the divine starts infiltrating every cell of your human body.
Wow, it's pretty amazing. Very amazing. I know when I first met Dr. Michael and we were working together and we were texting and I would ask questions and things. He was telling me to watch comedies. Not a very comedic person, but I started watching comedies, watching things that are funny. Several times a week, I would try to do that. And that did seem to help. The other thing he suggested I do is spend more time developing productive key habits, like watching the comedies, like time to meditate. If you're feeling stressed or if I was feeling overwhelmed, to just stop moving, stop thinking, spend a few minutes in meditation, all in conjunction with talking about healing in all dimensions, the specific diet that he put me on and had me go through, along with some supplements that they provided. So It was very interesting to watch my own healing in many ways, not just physically, but in a lot of ways, emotionally and spiritually, by doing those things that were suggested. So thank you for that.
I've had great mentors, and those mentors have transformed my thinking so that I then was able to even entertain changing my habits. Calling a timeout, recognizing your own illusionary stress.
Yeah, yeah. Well, for years and years, because partially, I guess, because of the home I grew up in, we watched the news all day long. The news was always on, especially in the evening. We were watching the news, which was a huge stressor. And it's been over 3 years ago now that we really stopped, my wife and I, we stopped watching news, like news media, news broadcasts, and those kind of things. I think that in itself made a huge difference. And, if there's something I need to know, I'll see something pop up on social media, or a friend or another student will mention something to me and I can go look that up. But there's no need for me to every day focus on what's going on in Washington, what's going on in Hollywood, what's going on with the wars of the world. And so by stopping being focused on those things, I think that helped me quite a bit.
It's about 40 years ago when I first went into practice and a patient was avidly watching news 6 to 8 hours a day. And they said to me, well, Doc, how often do you watch the news? I said, well, the last time I watched the news was sixth grade when I had to write a report. And my teacher said, you have to watch the news to write a report. And that's the last time I can honestly say I watched the news.
Have you missed anything in the world by
Nothing. Matter of fact, the day that we went to war, I guess it was the war with Iran, maybe back in the 80s. My patients came in and said, Doc, did you hear about it? I said, no, what? We went to war today. I said, okay, good to know. I wasn't getting drafted. I don't have any political influence. I mean, knowing it didn't change anything in my world, except now I had another piece of information that I've been told is important, but I never understood why it's important, because I don't run the country and I don't have that kind of political weight. So it's really interesting how we've been fed this TV and fed all different aspects on the TV, there's many evenings when I want to watch something, right? And it is such a challenge to find something with no drugs, no killing, no murder, no blood, no sex, it's hard to find a good PG movie.
It is. Yeah, and I'm not sure they make them anymore, unless you want to watch kids' cartoons, maybe. And some of those are questionable.
Oh, absolutely. Some of those are terrible.
The underlying humor is more adult than childlike.
Right. So, it is a challenge. And so we all need stewards. We need someone who's going to shine a little light and get us to question how we're leading our life. Does it really serve us? How often are you just going into silence and taking a walk? And in that silence, do you have the little guy in your brain talking to you? Oh, you need to do this. You need to think about that. You need to consider this. You need to go here. So, peace is truly a beautiful thing to attain. Quietness, calmness of the heart. When I was a little kid, 70 plus years ago, the leading cause of death on this planet was heart attack, the silent killer. Well, here we are, 70 plus years later. It's the same. The leading cause of death today in this country is still heart attack.
Wow.
So we've made absolutely, unequivocally, without opinion, it's just, you go Google it, it's still the leading cause of death. So how is that? Because we've never shifted. We've never shifted to live in our hearts. So the heart is always going to experience more agony and more angst from taking in what's happening all over the world, because the planet is in very rough shape and it's decaying and getting going more south in its lack of integrity, lack of humanness, and it's a challenge. So you want to attract yourself to someone who is going to guide and help you and facilitate those changes. I tell all my patients, I will always be available regardless of where I am because of modern day technology. I will always be a cheerleader. I will always be a positive force, the best I can be, in supporting anything that you're going through or that you're choosing to go through. Because if we have a little guidance, it can go a very, very long way. When I went through my greatest crisis with losing my family, I lost my whole family in a matter of 3 months. And at that time, one of my mentors bought me the whole set of, I think it was 6 volumes of Calvin and Hobbes. And at the time, I'd never heard of Calvin and Hobbes. And they bought me all 6 books, and he said, just read it. And I started reading it, and I was laughing all day, every day, every time I picked up a Calvin and Hobbes book, because it's a joke. It's a comic book, and it's been around for like 30 or 40 years, and they put them all into volumes. And it was a great blessing, while I was going through the angst of my heart, losing my family physically to deaths. And then obviously I watched a lot of Marx Brothers movies and a lot of comedies, and that's what allowed me to keep in balance and not go backwards. So we all need help. We're a community. We're a community all visiting planet Earth together, and the sooner we have that in our awareness, then we can turn to one another, call one another, and say, any positive ideas? Should I grow some dandelion in my backyard, or something where I touch nature, something where I feel a little more connected to the planet, as we have this giant parking lot that has been put up everywhere. And you're blessed, David. You've made great choices. You're out in nature, and I honor all those decisions and your path in permaculture, and just you're dedicated to that divineness, and it's a beautiful thing that I respect very deeply.
Oh, thank you. We appreciate that very much. Yeah, you mentioned something a moment ago about making choices and how those things affect our symptoms and our health. And there's something Alice had always said to me, if I would get mad at somebody, or whether it was one of the kids or coworker or whoever, she would say, well, it's a choice. If you're going to be mad, you choose to be mad. And
they didn't make you mad.
They didn't make me mad. I chose to be mad. And it took me decades for that to soak in. And I'm a lot better. I'm not perfect, but I'm a lot better than I used to be about making that choice, what's going to actually make me angry and what's not.
That's just brilliant knowledge that she shared with you. And underlying that is that our society trains us that we don't have a choice. You spill the milk, you get yelled at. We're all taught that, So I got blessed with, like I said, great teachers. And when my first son, would do something wrong, I'd go, come here. And he would shudder because of society. I'd say, you need a hug. And I again, it wasn't me. It was just great teachers teaching me. You know what? You really do have a choice. Every second of your existence, you have a choice. You can either react or you can act. And if you can act, then you can act from the heart with love and compassion and understanding and forgiveness and non-judgment. And if you keep those as your parameters and your goals every moment, then life radically changes.
Very good information. Yep. It's a very wise. You're a very wise man. When I started with you and I was going through what I was dealing with at the time, and there was a specific set a regimen, a diet, the things you wanted me to stop eating and things you wanted me to eat, and that was extremely painful in the beginning. That was very, very difficult. I did it, and thankful that I did it. But along that path, it changed a lot of things, but it also reinforced for Alice and I that what we eat is very important. What we choose, another choice, what we choose to consume, whether it's food, water, medicine, those things are all interrelated. So, from your point of view, as a holistic healer, how important are those things, and how do you use those as tools as a doctor?
It's a fascinating question again, and I'm so blessed. I was sitting in on another doctor's consultations yesterday, and she's a world-renowned homeopath who practices here in Frisco. Dr. Salmia, whose name is on my title here. And I was, she had she was doing a consultation with a new patient who had 30 years of being on drugs to balance her hormones because they had removed her thyroid. And she was still suffering tremendously. And she was reviewing her diet, and she was sharing with her, which I thought was just sheer brilliance, that you have organic milk. Okay. Well, in order to produce milk, the cow has to be lactating. That means the cow has to be pregnant. That means the cow is full of hormones at a maximum peak of hormone production. And then you're going to eat dairy with all these hormones in it while you're trying to balance out your own hormonal imbalance. It's impossible. It's just impossible. And when I heard that, and I have in my office a great library of books that I've collected for 40 years. And there's a book there strictly dedicated to the dangers of milk. No matter how perfect it might be in the commercial sense. Now, we're not talking about someone who has a cow or has a goat, goes into the backyard when the cow is pregnant or the goat is pregnant, drinking that milk. That's one thing. But the kind of production that has gone on worldwide with the perpetration and the abuse of the animal kingdom is astronomical. So even the cleanest of things are deadly, except for, broccoli never gets pregnant, so it's a good thing to eat. And, our vegetable kingdom is pretty clean, if it's raised properly. So, diet is a huge, huge factor for all of us. And water. People come in all the time and say, I'm drinking the best water there is. It's this bottled water. It's $7 a gallon or whatever it is. And I say, well, okay. And then I say, what's the name of it? They go, well, it's Fiji water. It comes from a remote place in the planet.
I think that was me.
I said, okay. I said, did you know that Fiji water has the highest arsenic content of any water ever tested in the whole world? And it's things like that people don't realize. And just when you take a bottle of water and you clamp down on it with your hand, right? If it crinkles, if you can hear any kind of crinkle or it gives way, then you're emitting all kinds of polyphenols and chemicals into your water.
And are those not hormone disruptors?
Total hormone disruptors. And people think hormones have to do with just, our sexual organs. No. The word hormone actually means messenger. So every cell of your body produces hormones because they're all sending out messages to communicate, whether they're building enzymes or whatever it is that they're manufacturing. They are part of that chain of having hormones. And, we're getting affected all the time. So it's tricky. It's tricky to lead a conscious life on this planet. It takes more effort than we ever thought. And I never knew, honestly, I started changing my diet when I was around 40. And then I changed again at 45. And I changed about every 5 years, I changed my diet in a certain way. Last year I turned 75. I again changed my diet because I like to be able to wear my two-piece when it comes to the summertime at the pool, and I want to look okay still, And our bodies change. We have to change how we eat. And as we age, hopefully, in the classical communities, you'd always go to an elder for advice. Now we don't have community. So it's hard to find advice. So that's why I tell people, you want to seek out a doctor who has only your highest interest in his heart. And that should be the goal of the doctor that you connect with, that he cares for you as if you're his brother, his sister, his father, his mother, because we are a family of man and we need to care for one another. And in that, share true wisdom and not be tied to opinions. People ask me all the time, well, Doc, what's your opinion of this diet? I go, I don't have one. They go, no, really, seriously, come on, you can tell me. I go, I don't have opinions. They don't work. I like facts, and if I don't know something, I'll say it. And if I get put into a position where they absolutely want to hear my opinion, I will say, this is my opinion. It has nothing to do with reality.
Yeah. It was interesting. It was interesting what you were saying a moment ago about how our cells communicate. Our cells are communicating in our body, not just with hormones, but with what nutrient needs are. And that kind of struck with me because, I deal with plants and produce and things that grow and study those kind of things under a microscope and have learned, well, plants are doing the same thing. That's God's design. He set all this up. And the plants are communicating through exudates and their root system and mycorrhizal fungi and all these other communicators in the soil to deliver exactly what that plant wants if it's available in the soil. So it's kind of the same thing happening in our body, is it not?
It's exactly the same thing. And then we can take it to a deeper level. I'm not sure here who's familiar with Dr. Emoto. Dr. Emoto gifted our planet with his awakening discovery that he would take water and have a priest hold the water and pray over it. Then he would take his electron microscope and magnify a cell in the water. And then he would take that picture and post it, and showed that when you are in elementary school and you take a piece of paper and you fold it and you cut it out to make a snowflake and you open the piece of paper, it is perfectly symmetrical. When the pastor or priest or monks sang or held the water, then that water was in perfect crystalline form with amazing beauty and harmony. If someone then held the water who was angry, it was 100% total distortion.
Wow.
So Dr. Emoto traveled the world, wrote books, had his calendar. I used to have his calendar up in my office every year for 10 years. And every month was a different beautiful snowflake that looked so amazing. And it would say below it, grace, when they were praying grace over food. That's what got recorded. And he showed that we are constantly making chemistry on the most subtle levels through our emotions. So many years ago, there was a group in the United Kingdom, and they wrote a book called Findhorn. And Findhorn was one of the first experiments with the plant kingdom to be loving the plants and giving it a certain vibrational quality. And then they grew all these plants that were huge, that had the most unique size ever, no matter what plant it was, because they received love. So plants feel. Everything is alive. Everything that grows. We grow, we feel. They did this experiment with premature babies in hospital settings. Nurses started observing that when you held a preemie baby, instead of leaving it in this little basket because it was so fragile, but instead you handled it, all the babies that got touched and handled got well like 500 times faster.
Makes a difference.
Makes a difference.
Yeah.
So
healing
touch,
take for granted.
Right. Healing touch, healing thought, healing feelings towards our food. I mean, why is it that in almost every culture, we sit down at the table, and in almost every culture, we say grace? What does that do? We're blessing the food that the divine has provided at this meal. Well, that changes the frequency of the food that you're eating instantly.
Wow. Good thing we say grace, dear.
Exactly, right? So grace, why is it that all cultures have that? No one taught each culture, okay, before you eat, just say grace. No, but somehow that divine knowledge is everywhere in every walk of life.
It's kind of a form of gratitude, and that's one of the things I learned from you and a couple other mentors as well, is as one of those productive key habits, is learning to practice gratitude. That I've struggled with in a lot of areas of life, but the areas that I've overcome with that, being able to express gratitude, whether it's over the food or whatever it is has certainly helped.
You know, with any experience we go through, whether it's radical, overwhelming trauma or loss or grief, you still have a choice. You can go to the other side. Be thankful that you're still here. Be thankful that you have the breath of the divine still in your body, and that you can share that blessing with any situation you choose to, and that we always have choice. Always.
Right. And we all need to keep that in mind. You know, every decision we make every day, every moment, everything are choices. So we just need to keep that at the forefront of our mind.
Yes. Yes. Very powerful.
Dr. Einson,
Yeah.
this is Katie Luce. I don't know if you remember me, but I've been a patient of yours in the past. But you've been talking a lot about emotional and spiritual. What would you suggest is the best way to get your body into an alkaline place as far as what you eat and the kind of water that you drink?
You know, you know me, and I don't ever give anything generic. That's why I tell people, you know, come on in, get your thermogram, get your oligo scan, get your test done, and your biochemistry is unique to only you.
Mm-hmm.
You know, someone came in again this morning, and I love when the divine brings me things to share so imminently. And they have this $5,000 purification system for water in their house. I looked at their results on their oligo scan, and the oligo scan is the most advanced heavy metal test in the world, along with it now goes inside the red blood cell itself and tells you the balance and imbalance of all of your minerals, along with about, I don't know, 7 or 8 vitamins. And there's nothing else in the world that can tell you that. Nothing. That goes through the palm of your hand. It uses a technology called spectroscopy, which has been in the biochemistry laboratories for 50 years. Point being that I told him, whatever water you're drinking, you have to stop. And he said, well, I got the best system. I researched it. It eliminates this. That. He said, why? I said, because it's causing more imbalances in your body. I don't know what your system is doing, but it's not working for you. So your safest bet right now, from what your body is telling me, is, you know, you need distilled water because it's just totally pure.
Mm.
So, you know, when you talk about alkalinity, there is a recipe for everyone. Be happy. Express unconditional joy for no reason whatsoever.
My wife and I, we have taken those tests, the thermography and all of those, and the result of that was super interesting. And when we were finished, we had this folder that had our scans, had all the information in it, some of which we really couldn't understand. It was like maybe somebody who doesn't know about soil looking at a soil test and trying to interpret those readings, which I can do, but I couldn't really understand a lot of that. But
right.
Dr. Michael took all the time in the world and explained what those findings were. And based on those findings is how he made the recommendations, not a prescription, but recommendations about what he thought based on those scans and that information would be of most benefit for healing whatever was wrong in either of us. So it made me a believer compared to what I had suffered in traditional Western medicine, where, you know, my next steps were, you know, either chemotherapy and drugs and radiation and all these other surgeries, and it was just endless. And so far, I haven't needed to resort to any of those. So the holistic path was right for me, and wish I had explored it much sooner.
I mean, you know, I get mine done every year. My patients always ask me, well, doc, how was yours? I said, I'm a two-legged. I'm on this toxic planet. I got stuff to work on. And I get updated every year. I do all my tests, and we've worked really, really hard to make it extremely inexpensive. We just brought down the price again. And then on every email that goes out to every patient, it says, and has always said and will always say, we have never refused a patient health care due to finances, ever. And I stand by that. People say, well, doc, I can only afford $25. I said, great. If that's your offering, I accept it, whatever it is. So we're here to serve. I said to a doctor last week, we were talking, he says, how can you do that? He said, your prices are ridiculously cheap. I said, when you took your oath to be a doctor, did it say that you get paid? And he looked at me like I was truly nuts. Seriously. He said, no. I said, so then? You're here to serve. You took an oath to serve. If 1 out of 100 patients can't pay you, 99 are. I think you'll eat tomorrow. You'll be okay.
The world certainly needs more doctors with that kind of attitude, because we all know the traditional medical system will certainly bankrupt people if it can.
Absolutely. And it's those of us that stand up and communicate something that makes sense. There's nothing irrational when you charge 99 out of 100 patients and you serve one for free. You think that's going to really affect any doctors? No. But will they do it? No, because they don't have the heart. And so you want to look for a doctor who's going to educate and come from the heart. Yeah.
Very true. And you're a great example of that. Dr. Michael, what about things, my test, and I'm sure many, many people's tests show really high levels of inflammation. What are some of the contributing factors to the inflammation in all of us, and what can be done about it?
Well, like I said, I'm constantly working. So since you've been in the clinic, I have a whole new line of anti-inflammatory products. So I'm the first doctor who has been allowed to carry those products, who hasn't gone through the quote unquote training, which is, $10,000 or $15,000 to be trained to use those products. But, so we have a whole new line of anti-inflammatory products, by the way, and both for the brain, the gut, and cellular wise, all three major areas of the body. It's the heavy metals that contribute so strongly. And we're constantly, our line that we have access to of plant stem cells that come from the Italian Alps that are grown only there organically are remarkable at pulling out heavy metals. And in order to do that, you got to have a healthy lymphatic system. So there's some steps, but it's very doable. There's nothing that can't be done. There is nothing generic, because I don't know if the heavy metals are in your lungs or if they're in your heart or in your kidneys or in your liver or in your lymphatic system. But, it can be easily identified, and then a protocol can be put together, and miracles happen, because the miracle is the body. And if you give it what it needs, it always responds, always. So sorry, there's no generic answer to that. But the good news is that I'm always looking for more answers, because, as Bill Gates said, he has funded chemtrails. And the goal of chemtrails is to cause more deaths, more hospitalizations, and more doctor visits. And they're as prevalent today as the sun is shining.
Yeah.
So, we're up against, some very strong forces that want to see the degradation of our society and the degradation of our brothers and sisters. And we just got to keep working on the good side.
So now you caught me sorting my eggs. But we want to say thank you to all of those that came to the Zoom and participated in that. And we hope you all enjoyed Dr. Einson. And we hope to have a part 2 sometime soon. And again, we're sorry for all the difficulties in the internet and, you know, the way things go. But thanks again. And if you liked it, please like it and subscribe if you aren't already. And we appreciate it. Thanks.